Okay, so we've been talking about factoring a lot, and I wanted to basically kind of wrap up the question that you asked me in the series of videos that you asked me about for factoring with this video. So basically, factoring is a precursor to the quadratic formula. And the quadratic formula is like if factoring was if factoring was just like a little like knife or something, like a small dagger, right? That you like bring into a fight, for all the stuff that you're fighting for whatever reason. This is factoring here. The quadratic formula is essentially a giant cannon or a tank that rolls in and just destroys everything, right? This is the quadratic formula. So, the quadratic formula is pretty awesome, and it basically allows you to factor without having to think about it so hard. So, super good. So, how do we remember this giant formula here? Well, have you ever heard of the song Pop Goes the Weasel? So unfortunately, I still remember this from high school, and I've had to use this formula so much in college that it's just been burned into my mind. So I'm gonna burn it into your mind now. So pop goes the weasel, right? So okay, the quadratic formula. Negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a, all right? So, you get it, right? So let's do it again, right? Pop goes the weasel. Negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a, right? So just practice that a lot. Look at it. You'll remember it. You won't be able to forget it anymore. It's like Baby Shark just for math. So again, one more time. Negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. You'll remember it now. So let's talk about how this is used, right? So essentially we have our values here. This is our typical quadratic equation, right? So it's called the quadratic formula because we have a quadratic here, right? So our a value is this one, our b value is this one, our c value is this one. Notice a is here and here, b is here and here, and then c is just here, right? So there's a few certain instances where you'll have to use this, and so let's just go through a few examples and then talk about kind of special cases that you'll run into. I'll probably have to do another video on the special cases because this can get kind of complicated. But let's go through and take a look at some examples, right? So we have example 1. And if you remember, this is actually an example that we solved in the past. So let's take a look at this, right? So step 1, again, what are we doing first, right? We're going to make sure that this equation is equal to what? To 0. Okay, so we have negative x squared minus 5x. We're doing minus 6 on both sides, so we'll do plus 24 here equals 0, right? So now let's look at the quadratic equation. Let's write down our a, our b, and our c. A, right? So here, our a is the term that's in front of the x squared term, right? So this is a negative 1. Our b is negative 5. Our c is 24. So let's go. We have negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4 times a times c all over 2 times a. So when we simplify this, we would have 5 plus or minus, and then let's do all of the terms in here. Negative times a negative is positive, so we have 25 minus, we have negative 4 times minus 1 is going to be 4 times 24 is going to be 96, negative 4 is going to be plus 96, right? And then here we have 2 times a, so 2 times negative 1 is going to be negative 2, right? So give me 1 second to get my calculator. Where's it at? Where's it at? Calculator. Where's my calculator at? Over here. Ah, it's under my sheet over here. Okay, sorry about that. But basically, we can enter this into our calculator here. And so let's just try to get the square root term figured out here, right? So we have second square root of 25 plus 96 is 11, right? So this equals 5 plus or minus 11 over 2, right? So then this breaks down into 2 cases, right? So we have 5 plus 11 over 2. And this is going to be your x1, right? And then we have our second case, x2, x equals 5 minus 11 over 2, or negative 2, negative 2, negative 2, negative 2, right? So 5 plus 11 is 16 divided by negative 2 is x equals negative 8. 5 minus 11 is negative 6. Negative 6 over negative 3 is x equals 3, right? So you can go and check our last examples, but this is basically a different way of doing the same factoring that we were doing. And it's typically a little bit easier if you don't get lost with the square roots and all the calculations that are taking place in here. Use your calculator for this. Use your calculator for all of this. Use your calculator for this. Use your calculator for this. Use your calculator for that. Just use your calculator. You'll get it wrong if you don't. There's a lot of stuff to consider here, but just remember, pop goes the weasel, and then use your calculator and you'll be good. Biggest thing to remember, again, plus or minus. The plus or minus here is crucial. This is how you get your 2 different terms, right? Plus or minus. 5 plus or minus 11 over negative 2 is going to yield 2 different answers. Do not forget that. It's super important. Super important. I forget this every time. That was the biggest thing in my junior year, was I would forget that every single time. So let's move on to the next example, which was sent to you, or which is the one that you sent me as a picture from your class. So first things first, let's look at what we got here. We have a quadratic here, which is like plus 6 minus 13. So it's like basically like the slope is kind of high on it, and it might be, whatever, we don't need to think about it too hard. But basically we have on the side, just for reference, we have a parabola that's like over here, or yeah, it's like here. And then we have another parabola that's like here or something, or really it's actually set at x equals 0. So that this one here is at 0, it's this parabola, and then we have another parabola here that intersects with it at some point. So disregard all of that. But basically, what do we need to do? Step 1, we set this equal to 0, right? So we're going to do minus x squared on both sides, right? So here you have 4x squared minus 13x plus 6 equals 0. So this is, now we can start, right? So let's write down our a, our b, and our c, right? A equals 4, b equals negative 13, c equals 6, okay? So again, you might need to write down the quadratic equation, but remember, pop goes the weasel, negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a, right? Just keep practicing that. So we have negative b, right? Negative 13 plus or minus the square root of b squared, which is negative 13 squared, minus 4 times 4 times 6 minus 4ac all over 2a, 2 times 4, right? So let's simplify this. Let's just look at it in the calculator, right? Let's do the square root term in the calculator, and hopefully we don't get something weird, right? So second square root of, we'll do negative 13 squared minus 4 times 6. So we have a non-real answer. Okay, so this is going to get interesting. So let's talk about it. Basically here, what's happening is you can't do the square root of a negative, right? So this answer is going to become negative. So negative 4 times 4 is negative 16. Negative 16 times 6 is negative 96. So then we have, right, so, okay, 13 times 13, 169. It should be a real answer. It was because I put the parenthesis there. So let me enter this in again. So you don't technically need to have this in here because you know that the 13 squared is going to be positive, right? So 8.5. So again, this is not a real number. So we'll do is, again, we have to go through and solve here. So let's see, we had 169 so yeah, we have negative 13 squared. So 13 times 13 is 169. And then we have minus, let's see, negative 4, it's minus 96 here, right? So this is, let's do 169 minus 96, which is 73. So this is square root of 73 in the square root term. So 169 minus 96 is 73, according to my calculator. So now we have negative times a negative is positive, so 13 plus or minus square root of 73 all over 8, right? And so basically, this is going to be your x1 will be 13 plus square root of 73 over 8. And then x2 is going to equal 13 minus square root of 73 over 8. And I will need to just double check and make sure that this makes sense, but it does because I don't think we can reduce this anymore. We probably can, but I'm not too good at doing that. You get the idea here. Basically, this is one answer and this is our other answer. It's because, again, our plus and minus value here, this is huge. You can't forget that this represents two different things: 13 plus square root of 73 over 8 and 13 minus square root of 73 over 8. Okay, so yeah, take a look at the old factoring video for this first example and notice how we got the same answers, right? And then check out how we did it here with the quadratic formula. Again, remember Pop Goes the Weasel. Remember factoring versus the quadratic formula. It's a little bit more complicated to use this instead of this, right? You just stabby stab instead of like, okay, turn on and add a missile and, like, you get what I'm saying, right? So it's a little bit more complicated, but you'll get the right answer every time compared to factoring. And so I'll leave it at that for now.